What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Week 7 edition of my Cash Tiers video. I'm Ben Halver, and today I will be going over every player that I currently am considering for cash games on the upcoming DraftKings main slate. I would like to remind both new and old viewers that I do update these tiers throughout the week. I will post the final version on my Twitter early Sunday morning. I encourage everybody to check that out, as the updated tiers will more accurately incorporate late week news. You can see my Twitter handle in the bottom right hand corner of the screen if you're interested in that. Let's just get right into it. Here are the QB tiers for week 1. Right off the bat, what you're going to notice and what I think about this slate in general is across almost all positions, there are a couple of good plays and they're all very tightly grouped together in terms of salary. So looking at quarterback, you see it right away. I've got 4 guys in my top tier, all between 6,300 and 6,800. Lamar Jackson, who, we're seeing him do historic things. Last week, I think it was first player to rush for 150 and throw for 200 in the same game. His insane, combination of passing upside versus rushing upside is making him just a completely unique player in terms of the fantasy landscape. 6,800 on the road against the Seahawks in what is currently at a 49 point game total. Opened at 49.5, was bet down slightly, but even so, this game is one to target, no doubt about it. I've got Russell Wilson in the same tier at 6,600. Russell Wilson has 28 points or more on DraftKings in 4 of his last 5 games. This is a spot to target him. Both him and Lamar make a ton of sense for cash. 6,300 for Matt Ryan. He's gone over 300 yards passing in every single game this year. He's on a complete tear, and now we're going to see him in a game that, should have a ton of potential. 54.5 point total, largest on the slate. The Falcons are home underdogs, so I think that we like that. We like to see, the potential for Ryan to be at home, to be passing a ton against the Rams here. And for 6,300 being the cheapest in this tier, I think that he is a guy that we can go to. I mean, if you've ran Ryan out there in cash every single week this season, you've probably been pretty successful, at least in terms of quarterback play. So, Ryan, I think, is no doubt about it in play. He's just so just bankable. Just bank those points, bank that 300-yard bonus. It's coming. You look at his last 5 games, 4 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns, 0 touchdowns, still put up 19 points in a floor game, 3 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns. He's just passing so much, and you got to love that. For fantasy, Josh Allen, though, the main event, Mr. Allen, 6,500. They priced them up considerably, respect to them for that. The crazy thing is the Buffalo Bills have a 29-point implied team total, highest on the slate, higher than the Rams, higher than the Giants at home against the Cardinals, higher than the Seahawks, higher than the Chiefs, okay? Highest on the week, not just the slate, but the week. They're 16.5 point favorites at home, coming off a bye, facing this Miami team. Allen has been consistent. We have not seen the ceiling game up to this point. I couldn't imagine a better spot to see that ceiling game. Bills coming out of a bye and just letting it all fly. I think that Josh Allen is he's due for a big game, if you will. Being due for something is a terrible, excuse to play a player, but I think it all lines up. When you look at Josh Allen, he's got a high rushing floor. He's got a high passing ceiling, I should say. And he's got stackable options if you're looking at GPPs. But in terms of cash, I don't really see a situation where Josh Allen lets down in this spot. I guess the only one would be, a crazy, Frank Gore 2 touchdowns, Singletary a touchdown type situation where it's all rushing. But I do think that the Bills 29.5 point team total, 29 point team total is totally reachable, and I would bank on them hitting that mark. So I think Josh Allen will be a huge part of that. And then when you look at my second tier of cash, I've got one guy here, sort of the only pay down option I think that's really in play for the slate. I wish that, we had a smash spot for Ryan Tannehill at 4,800, but that's really not the case. I would never go there in cash. Gardner Minshew, however, at 5,400, I do like. The Bengals are getting torn apart by rushing quarterbacks, and I wouldn't say that Minshew's a rushing quarterback, but he is averaging 23.8 rush yards per game. It's a slight boost, damn near a fraction of what like the 300-yard bonus is, for example. And the Bengals secondary is very banged up. There's going to be no Drake Kirkpatrick. There's going to be no William Jackson, and Minshew is in a pretty decent spot, I think, to tear up this horrific Bengals team. That being said, I do like the entire tier of those 4 players I listed already a bit more than Minshew. I think that there's much more accessibility to their ceilings opposed to Minshew's, but Minshew, I think, is a pretty decent bet to 3x that 5.4K salary. And you might need that salary this week because there are a lot of good running back plays at the top, and in terms of wide receiver, the value is not really there, at least not at this point in the week. Let's talk about running back, though, because this is where we're going to be spending the money this week. Unlike last week, we have several great pay-up options, whereas last week we were sort of more focused in that mid-tier. So we're getting Saquon Barkley back, and that's going to be the story this week. The Giants are home favorites in a game with a total over 50. We know the pace is going to be up, as it is with any team trying to play the Cardinals. So Barkley, he's rested, he's healthy. They were considering playing him last week, but they didn't want to. The Giants, surprisingly, their playoff hopes are not dead. And I think that they're going to lean on Barkley heavily in this spot against the Cardinals. 50.5 point total, like I said, and just a great spot for Saquon. He's 8,900, most expensive player on the slate, and justifiably so. I think if we can fit him in, you absolutely have to. He is the best pure play, I think, on the slate. And then looking a little bit lower, the second highest priced running back is Dalvin Cook, who I think is in just another great spot. 18-plus touches in at least every single game this season. The Lions' rush defense is decent, good, but not great. I mean, they got completely ate up by Jones and Jamal Williams last week on Monday Night Football. Lions are home, but they are also on a short week as they played on Monday night. Dalvin is incredibly consistent. The Lions are third in receiving yards allowed to running back over the span of this season so far. And Alexander Mattison had a bunch of touches last week. I think it was 13 or 14, but that game was in hand for the Vikings. If this is close, I think they're just going to hammer Dalvin Cook at 8K as much as they possibly can. I do like the idea of playing Dalvin Cook in cash this week, just jamming in 2 of these 8K running backs. Seems like a smart play. Looking a little bit lower, but still in my tier 1, I think Leonard Fournette at 7K is an equally good play. I mean, just completely bankable in terms of workload, 20-plus touches in 4 straight games, 6 or more targets in 5 out of 6. And just the workload is so great. Cincinnati can't stop anybody through the ground, on the ground, through the air, I should say. And it seems like, to me, Fournette is poised for some touchdown regression. Only 1 on the year with this insane amount of usage, and we know the Bengals are just a complete sieve. So I think that, Fournette is a great spot to target. You're getting similar, if not better, usage than a guy like Dalvin Cook for 1,000 less. So, for me, I think Leonard Fournette is as close to a must-play as you're going to see on this slate. And the Bengals, I will mention, are allowing over 30 rush attempts per game against them. So I do like looking to Leonard Fournette in cash. Once again, they only increased him $300 from last week. Next up, we've got David Johnson, and for pretty much the same reasons that we like Saquon, the same game environment and a bad defense, David Johnson seems like a play that we're going to want to target. Last week and pretty much every week this season, his workload has been wildly consistent. If he's not getting the rush attempts, he's getting the targets. Look at week 6, he had 12 attempts, but he had 8 targets. Week 4, he had only 11 attempts, 11 targets, 11 attempts, 9 targets in week 3. And then when he gets the workload, on the ground, maybe it's a little bit less. Like you see when he played Cincinnati, 17 attempts, only 5 targets, but still. Nonetheless, he's getting a ton of opportunity. The pace is up in every single Cardinals game. He's second on the team in targets. And again, this is a game with a 50.5 point total. I do like David Johnson at 7,800. It's going to be hard to play David Johnson with Cook, with Barkley. It's really just a matter of how do you compare Johnson to a guy like Cook, and how much of a difference does the 1.1K salary make that you would save in going down from someone like Barkley to Johnson? Those are the questions that we're going to have to consider in terms of playing David Johnson versus playing these other guys. Now, in the same tier, I've got Chris Carson at 6,500. He's the cheapest guy that we've discussed up to this point, and he's been pretty consistent. Early in the year, I was not super high on Carson, especially after that week I played him in cash and he got benched for fumbling. But, shout out to the Seahawks for sticking with their most talented back on the field despite some fumbling woes. Coming off of 2 straight 28-touch games, Chris Carson is at home in a great game environment like we talked about. Baltimore, what is thought of to be an imposing defense should be not too terrible in terms of a matchup, and the workload is just so consistent. I mean, Carson hasn't had under 20 points in 3 straight weeks. I think he has a good bet to make that 4th straight week with 20+ on DraftKings. So I think Carson is squarely in consideration, and he offers you a little bit of salary relief. I definitely would be looking at him only in terms of, I wouldn't be looking to play him over Leonard Fournette. If I'm in this range, I'm playing Fournette. It's just a matter of, can I jam in 2 of the guys who are priced above Fournette, or are we going to have to play something like Fournette and Carson, and then just one of those elite running backs? I guess we'll see what sort of value we can find at the other positions. Moving down a tier here, and these are some guys that I would prefer not to play in cash, but I think that, there's a discussion, at least in terms of their viability, starting with Marlon Mack at 6K even. Now, the Texans are allowing 140.3 total yards per game to running backs. The Colts are at home. And I think this game means a lot to the Colts. They beat the Chiefs in prime time. They got a bye, and now they're coming back to face the other team that just beat them, their division rival, the Texans. And, I think that this game is going to really shape the way the national media looks at the Colts. This is a big game. If they win this game after, beating the Chiefs, and then they get a bye, and then they come back and they beat the Texans, a division rival, I think that they're squarely going to be one of the, America's teams, if you will. And that's not a reason to play Mac, but I do think that they're going to lean on Mac heavily in this spot. And the Texans, they're not an imposing defense. They're really not. And pace, receiving work are the concerns for Marlon Mack in this spot. But I do think all in all, he's a great play. And in terms of early ownership projections, I think he looks to be a little bit popular as well. So I'm not the only one identifying these things. In terms of Marlon Mack, Kerryon Johnson, 5,100. I mean, he's just underpriced for his workload. Granted, the production hasn't been great. He has not hit 20 points yet on the season in a single game, but he has gone, double digit in the last 4 games, and his snaps are increasing. His receiving work is not increasing as, Darrell Bevell on the Lions offensive coordinating side of the ball is really just trying to incorporate J.D. McKissick. 5,100 at home in what will likely be a very slow-paced game. I don't think Kerryon is super attractive, but just in terms of, salary, in terms of price per dollar, I think he's a good play all in all. It would just be tough to go there. I think that there's better game environments to target this week. That being said, 5,100 for a guy with Kerryon's workload, it's good salary relief. And then finally, these guys are, guys I think that there's a lot to like about. They aren't necessarily the type of players that you would look for in cash. They're not 3-down plus goal line backs. Although in terms of goal line backs, Tevin Coleman is absolutely that. He has 16 carries in week 5, the first time that he was back since week 1. More carries in week 2, 20 touches total. And, interestingly enough, Tevin Coleman and Matt Breida are sort of becoming a 2-backfield instead of dealing with guys like Mostert and Jeff Wilson Jr., which will really clear things up in terms of both of them being fantasy viable if we can get this into being more of a 2-back field opposed to, a 3 or even a 4-back just total mess. But, the 49ers have a great matchup this week. Tevin Coleman has outtouched Matt Breida at an insane rate within the red zone, especially. He has 10 red zone carries on the year, opposed to Breida's 2. That's 8 more despite missing two games from Coleman. So 5,600, I think that there's a ton of upside, but it would be very easy for him to get vultured in the cash games. That is not something we like to see, but I do think he's a pretty decent bet to at least 3x. I just don't know, if you go there opposed to somebody like Marlon Mack for 400 more, or even pay down a little bit to get to a guy like Carry-On. And then, in this other tier of a guy who is, not what you would say splitting work, but, just splitting outcomes. I don't know what I'm trying to say here, but what I'm trying to say is Josh Jacobs. I think, he profiles well. I don't think he is necessarily a great cash play on the road. Bad team facing Green Bay, but Green Bay has gotten pretty much eaten up at running back besides last week against the Lions, and that was more so a function of the Lions not rushing. They tried to beat Green Bay through the air for whatever reason, but the Packers have gotten dominated on the ground. Josh Jacobs is seeing the touches. He had 26 carries and 3 receptions in the London game, and now after a week of rest, they get to come home, face a good matchup. It's just a matter of whether or not we can go there in cash games with such a low receiving floor. That being said, 2 targets, 3 targets in each of the last 3 games for Josh Jacobs. I mean, even if he's getting 2 receptions per game, I think that'll slightly, raise his floor. And at 5K, I think he is definitely, a good value. I'll at least say that in terms of what he offers you an upside, maybe more of a tournament play as we're talking through it now. Moving over to wide receiver, this is the ugliest position group, I think, on the slate in terms of cash game plays. There's a lot of GPP options at wide receiver this week, but I think we're going to be stretched thin to find consistent workloads at what we deem to be appropriate values. So my top tier here is John Brown and Auden Tate. Now, John Brown to me is just in a complete smash spot. Lower on this list, you'll see Cole Beasley, and I'll talk to him when we get there, but I think that Brown has a very comparable floor in terms of, wide receiver compared to Beasley in his own offense. But the $800 discount that you get from going down to Beasley doesn't come without the cost of sacrificing the ceiling. And we haven't seen John Brown's ceiling really since week 1, but I don't think that you're going to find a better spot to target him in terms of a floor ceiling combo than this week. So his floor is decent. And he is going to be matched up most likely against Xavier Howard, who is dealing with an injury at the time, but I think he is expected to play. Even so, he's given up 78% of the targets thrown at him, 2 touchdowns as well. Miami is allowing the most yards per pass attempt in the league. John Brown is the wide receiver 1 on the Bills. He's the go-to option for Josh Allen with the team on the highest implied team total of the week. And at 5,500, we see Josh Allen get a significant boost to his price from where his average has been. We don't see that from John Brown. He's really been in the same price range. So I think that was just sort of an oversight by DraftKings, and we need to attack it. John Brown to me is the top option in cash, and Auden Tate to me is the top value in cash. So, both top tier guys, but for different reasons. Auden Tate to me, he comes with risk. I got burned badly by a Bengals wide receiver last week in Tyler Boyd, but I think the risk is mitigated by only having to pay $5,400 for Auden Tate this week opposed to the $63 I played for Boyd last week. I'm much more, willing to embrace a little bit of risk for a low-priced guy, and Auden Tate would have at least 2x'd his current salary in 4 straight weeks. He is tied for second in the NFL in red zone targets. Through those last 4 weeks, he's getting 2 per game. Last week he had, I think, 12 targets, if I'm not mistaken, 11 targets. That is not what we would be expecting, but even still, I think that Auden Tate, at home, Bengals looking to do something on offense, hopefully, and the Jags now without Ramsey after trading him, I think I botched that. The Jags traded Ramsey to the Rams, and they're going to have to figure that out on the fly. So I think that Auden Tate, just with the red zone usage, with the decent target floor, and the price, all make him sort of a good play on DraftKings, especially in a week that we're kind of starved for value. Now, This next tier of guys, all guys from 6K to 5,800, they're all pretty reliable. I'll start with Kenny G here. Kenny Golladay hasn't had less than 8 targets on any game this season. He's Stafford's clear-cut number 1, and much like John Brown, who's facing a name value cornerback in Howard, who has not played up to that, I think the same is true of Kenny Golladay, who is going to be facing Rhodes. Rhodes are closed. Yeah, not so much. He is allowing 85% of completions thrown at him this year to be completed. I don't think that, the Lions are going to shy away from that matchup. Not sure if the Vikings will be confident to ride that. Hopefully they are. But at 5,800, I think Kenny's, floor ceiling is, it's appealing. He's got 33% of the Lions' air yards. And I think that we can definitely look to go there this week. T.Y. Hilton, 5,900. He's going to be one of the most popular plays on the slate. I'm not sure if it's for the right reasons necessarily. A lot of people, and I haven't really listened to any DFS podcasts yet this week, but I guarantee all the touts out there are going to be recycling all of the well-known T.Y. Hilton versus the Texans splits. Oh, he's done this versus the Texans in the past. He's done that versus the Texans in the past. Spare me, please, okay? T.Y. Hilton's stats with Andrew Luck at quarterback are less than irrelevant in 2019, okay? It has zero to do with anything that is happening in Week 7 on DraftKings in the NFL, okay? Don't even bring it up. You're a clown if you do. That being said, T.Y. Hilton is a great play this week. Not for those reasons, but for other reasons. He's catching 83% of the targets that Brissett has thrown to him, 4 touchdowns. The Texans don't have a good defense. This is a huge game in terms of, NFL implications for both teams. So I do think that we're going to want to attack T.Y. Hilton in this spot. His price is low, 5,900. Upside is high. He's been consistent. I'm all for it. T.Y. Hilton, one of the best plays at wide receiver. Next up, we've got DJ Chark, 6K. He's going to be one of the better plays, I think, on the board. Unsurprisingly, got locked by Lattimore against the Saints last week. Interestingly enough, the Bengals have yet to allow a wide receiver to top 90 yards. We'll see how that goes this week. I think DJ Chark is a great bet. He's going to get a ton of downfield usage like he has. He stacks well with Minshew. D.D. Westbrook missed practice on Wednesday with a shoulder injury. From what I'm seeing, it's still early, but I think that he is expected to miss practice Thursday. I think that would make DJ Chark massively owned, especially if Westbrook were to sit. I would prefer personally that Westbrook played. But that being said, DJ Chark will just be in a smash spot either way. This could be a trap, but I don't think it is. And, if Chark were a little cheaper, he'd be stone chalk and a smash play. At this price range around guys like Golladay and Hilton, it might be a little bit tougher to justify, but either way, I think that he is squarely in the same tier in terms of his floor and ceiling this week. Next up, I've got Cooper Kupp. To me, he is the top pay-up option for the second straight week. Yes, he burned us all, or at least not all, but roughly 30% of us in cash last week. He definitely burned me in cash last week. I thought he was a complete smash. He was my favorite wide receiver play on the board. And once again, I think that he is in an absolutely dominant spot, maybe even better, facing these Falcons. I love Cooper Kupp. I don't see any way in which he doesn't rebound. The whole Rams offense, I think, will rebound heavily this week, and Cooper Kupp will be the number one beneficiary of that at 7,400. The reason he is so low in my tiers, not because I think he's a bad play, not because I'm bitter that he torched my cash lines last week right there with Tyler Boyd, but more so just because of his price. And I think that, like I said, paying up for a running back is the move this week. It's going to be difficult to impossible to fit Cooper Kupp, I think, in cash games unless some crazy value opens up in the next couple days. And then lastly, these guys are the value that I'm seeing at wide receiver besides Auden Tate, Christian Kirk, and Cole Beasley. Now, Kirk is missed, two games, and he's still third on the team in targets. This is going to be a paced up game, as all Cardinals games are. He should return right to the slot with Larry Fitz there and just have a bunch of targets. At 5K, his target share is going to be high. In the 3 games that he played prior to getting injured, 12 targets, 8 targets, 12 targets, the volume is going to be there. And much like Cole Beasley, I don't know what the ceiling is. for a guy like this. But both of these guys in this bottom tier are good floor plays. Now, I like to incorporate ceiling into cash, but on a week like this, I might be forced to play at least one of these guys and just take the floor, take the 3x floor. Looking at Beasley, same thing. The Dolphins are destroyed in the slot. Beasley is leading the Bills in targets. They have the highest implied team total. If there was a more significant discount, I think, from John Brown at 5,500, he'd be a little bit more interesting. I think that it only being an 800 discount makes Brown a much more appealing play because at least you're getting some exposure to a potential, boom game by going up to Brown. So that is why these two gentlemen are in my final cash tier this week. Let's move on to tight ends here. Like I said with quarterback, the prices are just so compacted this week. So my top guy, Evan Ingram, 6,500. Everybody's going to be talking about the flow chart, blah, 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 blah. Just hammer tight ends against Arizona. That's fine. Okay. I talked about it, DVP, defense versus position, especially just with 6 weeks or less of sample, to me, not really that ideal a way to build your lineups or at least make it a key part of your process. I mean, I think it's worth considering, but, not incredibly heavily, I should say. They priced Evan Ingram up. They knew he was going to be massive chalk if they had left him in that, 5 to 5.5K range that he's been in for most of the year. And I think that they should because he's fully healthy. He's coming back. No Sterling Shepard. This offense is in a great spot against the Cardinals. Paced up. I've said it for at least like 5 players so far. 50.5 point total. 6,500 is a justifiable price for Evan Ingram. I think that there may not be a better bet to 3x the salary at tight end. That being said, you look at these guys below him in my tier 2, and we need to take the salary savings somewhere this week. We have to. And I think that tight end is the position to do it. So although Evan Ingram to me is an amazing play, I just don't know if he is attainable in cash, much like Cooper Kupp at wide receiver. Now, you look at these guys from 5,300 down to 4K. Hunter Henry to me is maybe the worst option here just because, the Chargers, it's not going to be a good game environment against the Titans there, and he is coming off 2 weeks off an injury. That being said, obviously the injury did not hamper him whatsoever. 8 receptions on 9 targets for 100 yards, 2 touchdowns. He ran incredibly hot, getting the 100-yard bonus and 2 touchdowns last week, opposed to a guy like Mark Andrews, who barely missed a touchdown and fell 1 yard short of the bonus. So I think that there is a little bit of recency bias there in the way that people are going to be looking at Hunter Henry. That being said, we're looking at a guy here who obviously has a ton of upside, and at a 4K salary, I think is in consideration. But really, I think the spot that I want to attack is right here between 4,700 and 5,300. Austin Hooper, if I'm not mistaken, has only 2 less targets than Julio Jones. And he comes with a significant 2.7K discount off of a guy like Julio. Now, we've seen it. If you look at the last 4 weeks, he has 3 games over 24.6 points on DraftKings. He's steadily seen his price increase, but not enough. At 5,300, he is still a smash play in what should be a game that we are all targeting this week. Like I've talked about, Atlanta at home against the Rams, 54.5 point total, and Hooper is only 5,300. Mark Andrews leading the Ravens in targets. Again, mentioned it briefly, fell 1 yard short of the 100-yard bonus last week. That was crippling, definitely to some people who are rostering him in GPPs especially. But, just super consistent. Hasn't had under 7 targets in a single game this season. 4,900 facing Seattle in what will also be a game to target, I think, is a great spot. And then Waller on Oakland. He's seen 18 more targets than the next closest Raider, 90% of snaps, 26% market share of targets. The Raiders are going to be without Tyrell Williams, and I played Waller 2 weeks ago for that same reason, and that did not help. But, who else are they going to throw to? He's really all they've got. They just extended him this week. So, he's going to be super happy or whatever. I don't know what kind of narrative that even is, but I don't know. I think that Waller, just in terms of workload, should be in consideration here for cash games. So it's going to be really tough to differentiate, I think, between these guys. Tight end is really, really tight this week in terms of, what's the leverage. All these guys have reasons to play them. All of them, I think, have a decent reason to fade them, save maybe Austin Hooper and Mark Andrews. So yeah, it's going to be tough to figure out. I definitely would recommend, like I said at the top of the video, checking back Sunday morning and seeing how these tiers shake out. I'm expecting a lot of change this week in terms of where these guys are slated as things become more clear and start to take shape for this Week 7 slate. I will close out now with DST. I've got two tiers here. It's basically the pay down and the pay up options. I tiered the pay downs above because that is the optimal way to play cash games in my humble opinion. I've got the Colts here at 2K. Now the Texans have gone from being sacked at one of the highest rates to being sacked at one of the lowest rates over the past 2 weeks. That being said, the Colts are in a pretty decent spot, I think, to really dominate. Here at the line of scrimmage, 13 sacks on the year. They've been somewhat consistent, not the greatest defense in terms of fantasy, but at 2K, I think they are the cheapest home defense that is viable. We are not going to be playing the Redskins for $1,700 against San Francisco. And, DraftKings did price Miami down to $1,500, but I don't think that we can go there on the road against the Bills off of a bye. Unlike the Jets last week, this is a spot I will heavily avoid despite the great price tag on the Dolphins defense. And the Lions are a team that, they've had a decent amount of success up to this point on defense. They've been a little more consistent than the Colts. That being said, I don't know. This is going to be a slow-paced game with not too many pass attempts, not too much room for mistake, I don't think. So, I don't know. But if you feel strongly perhaps about the Texans offense smashing the Colts in this spot, maybe you would prefer to go to the Lions at 2,300. I don't think I would personally, coming off of the 6-game short week. And then we've got the two pay up options. Both of these are in smash spots. I put the 49ers on there at 4,100 because their defense is absolutely insane, averaging 14 points per game on DraftKings. They are dominant, and they're going to be playing the Redskins, who are absolutely horrible on offense. So that is definitely a spot that we're going to want to look at. But, really the cream of the crop here is going to be the Bills at 4,300 for all the reasons we've talked about throughout this video. So far, every defense that has played Miami has, at minimum, been top 12 in terms of scoring on the week for defense. So I do think, that the Bills are a great play, definitely in every single format. It's just, non-optimal to pay up 4,300, I think, for defense and cash games. That's what it comes down to. But that being said, they're the best pure play on the board. No doubt about it. But that's going to be it, guys. Thank you for watching this week's Cash Tier video. If you liked what you saw, subscribe on YouTube. More importantly, follow me on Twitter because that's where the information is. And yeah, guys, good luck this week. I think that we are going to have a good week. I'm feeling good about this week. So, good luck to everybody. And we will be back next Thursday with another Cash Tiers video and on Monday to review the cash lineup that I ended up with. So, see you guys then. Thanks for watching.